Your vulnerability comes through also with a lot of power, Eleni. Thank you for not just being vulnerable for vulnerability's sake, but being clear about who you are and honoring your journey, even with missteps or mistakes or, bad decisions. We've all made bad decisions and we've all misstepped in different ways, to different degrees. So I appreciate that you're being vulnerable to express where the journey is taking you, where you were, where you've been, and where you're maybe heading. Also, when you talk about holding yourself accountable each and every day, that's personally a value of mine and a part of my daily practice, even in the smallest ways sometimes. Sometimes it's not a grand gesture of, okay, I'm going to articulate everything that I'm not happy about with myself or where I misstepped. Sometimes it's just a quick mental note before I go to bed. Okay, that happened. Okay, I'm aware. I want to be mindful and I want to maybe think about how I can approach that differently. Also, I want to add that accountability also includes the things that we do well. That's what I love about accountability. It's not just where we've misstepped. It's also about, looking back, I can see I've grown. That's where I was 5 years ago. That's where I was a year ago with this particular challenge or area of my life. And here I am now. Oh, I can look back and I can see the growth or I can see the improvement. That's all, in my opinion, that's also a part of accountability. And I recognize for myself when I do that daily or as close to daily in frequency as I can, then instead of it being a mountain on my shoulders, it's like a molehill. It's small. I can manage that when it doesn't become this huge mountain. And I've had times in my life where I wasn't addressing certain challenges or issues and they were weighing me down. And it's still something that I addressed ultimately, but it just was a harder process. But, that's also part of learning and growing, how to find your way to honor yourself, but also, like you said, to honor the truth. It's quite a process. So I want to just say thank you for the vulnerability and again, having that come through with the power of your journey. That's really obvious and apparent as you speak. So please continue, as you share your story and you speak to people and encourage people. I hope that still continues to be what you offer, vulnerability and truth, but also allowing the power to move through you. And I did want to just make a quick comment and reflect on what you said about when you did go to see your first husband and to hold yourself accountable and to say you were sorry and that you were aware that he was aware that this seemed to be more about you and more about you releasing the burden. But I still would say, but isn't it also important that he knows that you not just were capable of doing that, but that you offered that? Yes, it was about you saying sorry and calling yourself to account and lightening your load. But I, of course, I don't know him and I'm not going to pretend to know what he's thinking, but I just wonder for any person in his situation, in his shoes, there's still something that feels right about that, even for that person, right? It does give them some sense of, I don't know, justice or just a sense of, okay, this person has taken responsibility. It's like you're honoring him, you're respecting him.
Yeah.
I don't know if he felt that. I don't know if that's how he processed it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, as you said, he commented, okay, well, do you feel better now? But I have to believe that anybody in that kind of situation would want that versus no apology or no accountability at all. It wasn't just 100% about you.
Well, interesting.
That's my reflection.
Yeah, interesting you say that because that was my intention. Wasn't that it was about me. So my intention was all about that. I needed to say this to him for him. It was only when I reflected back later on that I went, oh, it really was about me. So when I was going into it, it was all about he needs to hear this. He needs to know it wasn't him. He needs to know that he did not, fall short, that he is a great man. He needs to hear this. This is what I wanted him to know. So I really did go in there with the intention of not unburdening, but giving him a gift. But upon reflection, I thought, really, it was about something I had to do, not necessarily something he had to hear. But I agree, Tiffany, that there is no one way. Like, the universe does not arrange something so perfectly so that just one person benefits. Both parties in that transaction would have completely benefited. And even if he didn't, because he's not the kind of person that speaks about emotion. Like, he just doesn't do that. And that was also the difference between him and my second husband, who very much did. And so, there's so many more layers that obviously I didn't discuss here today, but he's that person that he's not going to, allow his emotions to come forth. So it was easier for him to say, do you feel better now, than to say, oh, thank you, I feel really touched with what you said. But I do believe he had to have been touched. He had to have felt he would have felt the energy of what I was giving him, which was in that moment pure love.
Right. Anything that's done with pure intentions, pure motives, a pure heart is going to mean something. It's going to have a more powerful effect, even if it's not in the moment.
Yeah.
But putting that out into the world and giving that, sharing that with someone, it is more meaningful and more powerful. And right, that's all I was thinking about. Sure, I was not assuming that I understood exactly how you felt about that moment for you, but I just think whether it was about you or about him as well, it seems that the act of being accountable benefits everybody. Like,
Yeah.
to me, that seems like that comes with that virtue, that quality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sure, everybody can process and experience differently. And right, maybe if someone is not going to be able to share their emotions in the moment, you won't maybe know, but I think inherent in accountability
Absolutely
is something beneficial, mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And that's what's so powerful to me about owning that and embodying that virtue, embodying that quality. So again, appreciate you being open and sharing. And I don't mean to pry, so I want to ask this question as high level as I can, if you're open to just talking about how you now think about what I don't know how old your son is, but how you have communicated with your son about his life, his journey, his choices based on your own experience as a child, as a young person. Like, there's always an evolution, ideally, right? From generation to generation, an evolution in a positive way. So I'm just curious, as much as you're, open to sharing, what has that looked like for you and your son now that he's the next generation and you have taken this journey, and no doubt you've gained a lot of insight about life, but also about who you are and your own family culture. And as wonderful and beautiful I know your family must be, how some of what you inherited ended up maybe blocking, some of your own personal truth, and you're honoring that about yourself as a young person. So I'm just curious how that has looked like for you and your son.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So my son Peter, he turns 30 in a few weeks, which I cannot believe. He's turning 30 years old. I feel like it's almost like inverted, because he was the experience of a divorce relationship, and he experienced what that felt like to be part of a blended family, because he had, in the second relationship, he had stepsister and stepbrothers, and that in itself was challenging, and so much that he experienced, a lot of challenges growing up. I feel that made him, influenced him to be more conservative, if that's possible. So as an example, he was never a boy that went out just for the sake of going out. Like, I would encourage him to go out, and, but he was like, no, I don't want to go out with that person. This is the kind of woman that I want, or the kind of girl that I want. And she hasn't come in my path. So I'm not going out with just anyone. I can't see the point. So he was never anyone that would just have a relationship for the sake of fun or frivolity. For him, if he was going to go out with anybody, it was going to be with the potential to marriage. So that's the way he saw things, very much like very conservative. So he's nearly 30, and in that time, he's only been in 2 serious relationships. And he's with his second one now, who I'm certain is his partner that, they will get married. And that's, he just doesn't resonate with relationships that are not meaningful, that don't mean something. For him, stability is very important. And so he was never interested in, let's just go out and have fun with this girl. No, he'd rather be single. He didn't want to have, he didn't want to sleep around. He didn't want, any relationships that were not meaningful. And so I feel that was his response to seek his mother, because I never hid the truth from Peter right from the very beginning. He always knew as to why his parents separated. One thing that I never ever wanted it to be a secret from him. I never wanted him to find out something years later. So he always knew the truth that, Mum had fallen in love with another man. It wasn't Dad's fault. I had always said that right from the very beginning. So he always knew the story. And yeah, his path has always been shaped with being conservative and being serious about his relationships, and being very, very aware of what he wanted in a partner, very conscious of the qualities he wanted, very conscious of who he wanted to be by his side. And that's how I feel this situation influenced him. It's hard to tell, Tiffany, how much is really his inherent nature, because his dad is like that as well. And, how much is conditioning from everything that he experienced. My intuition tells me that it's actually a mixture of both, that, he is the person that he is because of who he is, and because he's seen what it's like to live in a blended family and a family unit that's not together, that he doesn't want that for himself. And so he's very thoughtful about relationships and who he is in the world.
I wish him well. Best wishes, Peter. I think what I was also curious about was, this idea of the family culture, because the family culture evolves, and you said that you had, you were very kind of sheltered and protected, and it doesn't sound like that was something that you necessarily imposed on your son, but he just, through circumstances, maybe created more protection for himself. Like you said, it was about being more thoughtful and more meaningful about his relationship. So I was just curious about how, does that make sense? Like how that,
I think
the family culture, and I don't mean like either ethnic or national, although that influences it, but every family has its own culture. So just hearing you talk about your childhood, I was just curious about how that then connected to him.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a little different than yours.
Little different, but the same as well, because our values are our values. And looking back, I was an overprotective parent, and even I overcompensated for the fact that he was in a family that wasn't like every other family. So I overcompensated. I was like all over him in terms of how he's feeling. Is he okay? So, he would often say to me growing up, I wish you had another child just so that the focus was not always on me. Because my focus was completely on him, because I felt so guilty and ashamed about how he had to live his life because of me. I overcompensated, and I was the helicopter parent where I was always zoning over him. And it was a very big process for me, Tiffany, to see that I was actually doing the same thing that my parents were doing on me. And I did repeat the same patterns, and it was not in the same way. Of course, I encouraged him to go out. So it wasn't about that. But I was a helicopter parent, and I was trying to protect him from feeling hurt and feeling pain. And I would do anything so he wouldn't feel that hurt and pain. And so it wasn't until I intentionally and consciously released that need to try and make sure that he's happy, that he actually became happy and found his second relationship. I had to actually let go. Not let go in the sense not see him, but let go in the sense of like, are you okay? Tell me about your day. Like always being around him, giving suggestions, giving guidance when I wasn't, when he didn't ask for any. So I was that parent. And and I learnt that that's not the best way to allow him to step into his manhood. And the moment I let go and stop being that parent, which was very difficult and challenging, but the best thing I ever did, then he was free to attract the person that he wanted in his life. I felt like through my expectations of wanting him to be happy, actually was the resistance between him and being happy, if that makes sense.
It does. That's so insightful of you. And I want to reflect back to you that the awareness that you had in what you just shared did allow the change to happen, did allow the family dynamic to shift, right? And to me, that in small ways and big ways, that's the journey. That's a personal journey that we evolve in our own personal lives, but then also with family. And we are always I think most of us, although some of us come from very, very hard family experiences that are so painful that all we want to do is remove them. And that's completely understandable. But I think there are a lot of us who recognize, okay, no, I didn't have a perfect family. But there's this awareness, or more of an awareness of, but I can do my part to kind of add to the evolution, to the progress. And it's not perfect, of course, but I think the self-awareness and understanding how our family culture influenced us in positive ways and in ways that were very challenging and maybe weren't as supportive as we would have liked looking back. That's the power. Then we think, okay, well, can't change ourselves overnight, right? It's just taking those steps, but the awareness and the understanding that things they don't have to stay this way. And as a parent, I'm not a parent yet, but I can imagine that as a parent, you get to a point maybe where you say, okay, no, I don't want this pattern to continue. I'm not sure how to change it right now, but I acknowledge I don't want this to continue. So I just want to reflect back to you. That's what I heard you saying in so many words, in your own words, of course. And to me, that is evolution. And maybe doesn't seem grand or obvious to some people, but all of these decisions that we make and the changes we make, the empowerment we have about changing our beliefs, and I don't mean core values. I just mean a belief that you may hold that maybe isn't fully based on truth, right? And then as you do more work, as we're more accountable, I find you can get to the truth of what's going on in a given situation and say, wait a minute. Maybe I don't need to look at it this way. Maybe I can reframe. That's what I mean by belief. I don't mean like a core value. So anywho, just wanted to reflect that back to you.
I think that what you said is important, which is awareness first. Like that's how evolution happens and how transformation happens. It's not about, completely changing the way we do things. Before we change the way we do things, we have to be aware of them. Like there was a big, transition period from me being aware of how I was, reflecting back my expectations to my son compared to, so now I've got to stop doing that. So it was awareness is first, like just really being aware of what is going on, how you are really relating to the people around you. And then, so what can I do to now shift that? How do I break this pattern so that it's best for everyone, especially the person that I love so dearly? What would be the best for him? And I came to the realization that I needed to allow him to be the man that he could be without me guiding him there. It's me guiding him there that was stopping him from stepping into it. I needed him to do that on his own. It had to be his journey, not my journey. I reflected back to when I was his age and the kind of things that I was doing. And it was like, well, I wasn't making the best decisions back then. So allow him to experience himself. So it's all about awareness first, like be really aware of what's going on and stop and reflect And then we can make the changes that we need. And like you said, Tiffany, they may not seem like grand changes, but they are in effect, because you do one small change and that is a whole pattern of generational patterns and ways of doing things that we have now stopped.
Yes, it's a profound part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that idea that parents will say, well, I want better for my children. I think that for so long that has meant materially.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it still does. Again, I'm not a parent yet, but I can imagine, of course, materially, you want maybe, although a lot of us have a lot of material goods, so I don't know what can really be better in some ways. But I think that now maybe, I'm curious what you think. When parents say, I want better for my children now, I wonder if they don't just mean materially. I wonder if they mean more from a spiritual, conscious, emotional place of like healing and health and balance. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there as an idea. Do you know what I mean? I think it used to be so much about, I want better. I want my kids to have more materially, but I don't know if that's still what people mean when they say that.
I believe that people want their children to be happy, and this is where it differs from family to family. Well, how do you think they will be happy? So for me, I wanted my son to be happy, and for me, that didn't mean material things. For me, because of my own experience, that meant finding a partner that he truly loved, experiencing life with someone by his side. When he was telling me, Mum, I'm happy, even though I'm single, I'm happy. But for me, that wasn't happy. So I think that we want our children to be happy. And then some families think that happy means a good job. Some families think happy means having security and safety and a house. I think happy means something different for everyone according to their own life experience. So for me, it was all about happy means a happy relationship. And then that's what I was projecting onto him, that I wanted for him, until I finally let that go and allowed happy to present itself in any which way that happy was for him. And so that's what I believe. I think that, yeah, it's according to what we think it means to be happy. That's what we want for our children.
That's so wise. It makes so much sense. Yes. Yes. And I think what I'm trying to like hit on also is, it seems like there's a consciousness that's a collective consciousness that's growing, that acknowledges we need, like when it comes to mental health, you know, which is an aspect of that happiness, you know, when it comes to having fulfilling relationships in our lives. I think that there is this more of an awakening to that being just as valuable for more people than maybe it had been, right? It felt like it was so much about survival in the past generations, with good reason.
Yeah.
People were coming out of world wars and civil wars in different parts of the world. So wars are still happening, of course, but I think that's just something that always I noodle on in my head of like, is there a consciousness that's growing though?
For sure.
You know, other aspects of our lives. So, but as a parent, I appreciated hearing what you were saying, that it probably does differ. I think you're right. It must differ from family to family. Well, I want to offer you this time to share with the audience any words of wisdom, any words of encouragement, any insights, any final thoughts that you want to share with them before we wrap up.
I would love to. I just want to say, if you're listening out there and you have done something or experienced something that you are not proud of, that wasn't your highest moment, just know that that is not you. That is just a moment you didn't master. It wasn't your highest moment, but it was the best that you could do at the time for whatever reason. Lack of courage, consumed by fear. And that's not to say that, you know, all the things that you did, you know, just go and do them again. Of course not. But whatever you have done or whatever you have experienced, it's okay. You know what? It's part of the human experience. We're all living this life the best that we possibly can with the circumstances that we're in. We're all human. We've got to stop putting people on pedestals and thinking that they're better than us because they've done better. You just don't know their story. As a therapist who has seen thousands of clients, I can tell you that everyone has a story that somebody else doesn't know. And it just makes us human. So know that you actually are a being of light in a human body, and your pure consciousness is so good and it's so perfect. And that's who you really are. Your actions are not who you are. Don't allow them to define you. You are a perfect being of pure consciousness and pure light. And the closer we get back to being who we really are, that's when our superpowers come out. And that's when we eradicate all sorts of illness, because illness comes about from not being aligned physically, emotionally, mentally, from actions that are not close to who we really are. So come back home to who you really are. And who you really are is absolutely divinely perfect.
Very poetic. Thank you. And I did listen to your episode, your first episode, where you shared your story on your podcast. And I just wish you all the best. I want to encourage you to, I know your podcast has other guests talking about their experience with shame, but just I wish you well on that journey, and want to encourage you to continue supporting others as they share their stories with shame.
Thank you.
Yes. And I always end the podcast with this question. I'll ask it now. Which is a television show that you recommend? It could be new, it could be old. But which one do you recommend and why?
Okay, so my answer is going to be a little bit different perhaps to other people. I intentionally and consciously do not own a television. So I would recommend that the best television show is your life, and to start being the observer of your life rather than the observer of other people's lives. Because when you start to observe your life as if you are the character of a television show, which is the way that I live my life, you start to notice things that you don't get distracted from. You start to notice things about yourself. As an example, yesterday I had a conversation with my sister, and I noticed that I felt something in my body, like a triggered moment. And I went, oh, what was that about? If I was consumed with watching television, I'm not saying that's bad. Like, there's no judgment in anything that you've done or anything that we all do and the way we choose to live our lives. Just become more aware of you as the character of your own movie, because we are characters of this movie that we call life. There's something more than this. So watch yourself, be observant of how you react. What are your triggered moments? What's happening for you in your body? Why are you getting triggered? And then when you go deep in yourself and really have that self-reflection, that's where the most incredible, magical growth can happen.
Yes, you're right. No one has offered that as a response. Thank you so much, Eleni. I am so appreciative of not only the time that you offered me and the audience, but the sharing of your story, of your journey, and no doubt you'll continue on and you'll continue to grow and evolve. And I just wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. You were a beautiful host to this podcast. The questions were really, really lovely. I felt very comfortable and very safe. And yeah, really beautiful, intelligent, articulate questions. I can understand why this podcast is doing so well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.